Chapter 12, Palestinian-Israeli Sniper War. The Road to War. While the history of conflict between Jews and Muslims extends back to the creation of Islam in the 7th century AD, the beginning of modern hostilities finds its roots in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which outlines Britain's new policy towards the Palestinian territory, the acceptance of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. From then on, a flood of Jewish emigres poured into the territory, creating rising political and social pressures and eventually led to rupture. In 1948, Palestine's Jews declared independence from Britain. The Jewish state of Israel was formally created. Immediately, the surrounding Arab states pounced on the new nation, trying to annihilate it at its birth. Troops from Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, and Lebanon, along with armed groups of Palestinian Arabs, all marched against Israel. However, with a ferocity born from desperation, Israel defeated all comers. An ensuing peace treaty, brokered by the United Nations, resulted in a greatly expanded Israel, with the Gaza Strip falling under control of Egypt and the West Bank being occupied by Jordan. The First War set the stage for an unbroken string of continuing violence, engulfing Israel for the next 60 years. In 1956, Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal and refused to allow Israeli shipping to pass through it. With British and French support, Israel launched a punishing attack and occupied the Gaza Strip and the entire Sinai Peninsula. In 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike, which ignited the Six-Day War. At the end of this fighting, Israel soundly trounced Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq, and wrestled control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, snatched the Golan Heights from Syria, and seized the West Bank from Jordan. From 1969 to 1970, Egypt fought a war of attrition against Israel on the Sinai border, hoping to wear out Israel's military resources over time. Then, in 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack, which met with initial success and then ended with another humiliating defeat for both Arab nations. Fighting erupted again in 1982, when Israel, provoked by a steady stream of rocket attacks, invaded Lebanon and pummeled Syrian forces and various Arab and Palestinian militias. While Israel occupied southern Lebanon for the next 18 years until 2000, it was engaged in a continuous guerrilla war with Hezbollah, the Party of God, which was created to resist the Israeli occupiers. Hezbollah and Israeli went at each other's throats again when Israel conducted a limited but destructive invasion of Lebanon for a second time in 2006. A new threat, guerrilla warfare. One of Israel's enemies understood they could not defeat Israel using conventional means of warfare. His name was Yasser Arafat. In 1959, Arafat formed the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, better known by the acronym Fatah. In 1964, as Arafat expanded his organization, the Arab League created the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, whose goal was the destruction of Israel. Unlike his conventionally minded peers in the Arab League, Yasser Arafat offered a non-traditional solution to the problem posed by Israel. Arafat believed the only way to fight Israel was through a protracted guerrilla campaign. By 1969, Arafat and his Fatah movement gained enough support that Fatah became the dominant member within the PLO, and Arafat was elected chairman. From 1969 onwards, the PLO, under the stewardship of Arafat, waged a protracted insurgency to overthrow the Jewish state. This unconventional war was not fought with planes, tanks, and artillery, but with suicide bombers, ambushes, car bombs, snipers, kidnappings, drive-by shootings, mass murder, and terror, all directed at the Jewish state. Other forms of pressure were used against Israel as well, as shown during the initial Intifada uprising of 1987, where riots, stone-throwing, boycotts, strikes, and other forms of civil disobedience were used to pressure Israel and turn world opinion against the Jews. While the Intifada raged in Israel's backyard, in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, new threats were forming. Out of the 1987 Intifada grew a new, more radical Islamic group known by its acronym Hamas. Hamas was more hardline than the PLO, rejected any sort of reconciliation with Israel, and its sole purpose was the destruction of the Jewish state. Consequently, as Israel ventured into the new millennium, it found itself less threatened by other Arab states, but mired in the sticky, bottomless pit of a vicious, complex, widespread guerrilla war. The urban terrain. Israel's effort to fight the Palestinian insurgency was difficult in part because Israel rapidly grew into an urban nation where the vast majority of the people lived in the cities. For example, by 2007, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv alone housed over 1 million people. These large, modern, urban areas with concentrated populations and towering structures gave the Palestinian guerrillas excellent terrain to move, hide, and fight in. Complicating the situation even more was the fact many of the urban populations were mixed between Jews and Arabs. This mixing of people was a direct result of Jewish immigrants gradually moving in and forcing out the existing Arab populations from the capture and occupation of the largely Arab Gaza Strip and West Bank, and the subsequent creation of Jewish settlements in these areas. The different Arab guerrilla organizations fighting in the occupied territories discovered the familiar surroundings, filled with a supportive population, and combined with favorable urban terrain, allowed them to wage a guerrilla war indefinitely. In the 1.5 million person Gaza Strip, Gaza City itself had a population of 400,000 people in 2007. The Palestinians fought a sustained urban guerrilla war against the Israeli occupation government from 1967 until 2005, when the last Israeli troops pulled out. The situation was even more complicated in the captured West Bank, where the majority of the people were Palestinian Arabs, estimated at 2.5 million people, who lived in urban areas like East Jerusalem, which was annexed into Israel proper, Jenin, Hebron, Bethlehem, and Nablus. Among this sea of Arabs lived small, isolated settlements of Jews numbering about 250,000 settlers. As a result, Israeli soldiers and settlers in the occupied West Bank found themselves confronted by an entrenched urban insurgency enjoying widespread popular support. The inherent nature of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, with its dense urban terrain, mixed populations, and lopsided military balance, ensured there would be some level of urban guerrilla sniping by the Arab insurgency. Only time would reveal its scope and intensity. The Palestinians' guerrilla sniping system. From the beginning of the Palestinians' organized resistance against the Jewish state, they employed guerrilla snipers. This was a natural choice since the Palestinian resistance historically lacked heavy weapons such as tanks, artillery, or modern anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles. However, the lowly rifle was always available. Over the years, the Palestinian resistance established means for supplying themselves with weapons to include sniper rifles. To start, weapons were shipped across the Mediterranean Sea and into the Gaza Strip from Lebanon and other foreign donors through privately owned vessels. Also, gunrunners smuggled weapons in from Jordan and then across the border and into the West Bank. Down along the coast, tunnels were dug under the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, where guns were brought in by the crate loads at night and then distributed to the PLO, Fatah, and Hamas through a covert supply system designed to defeat Israeli scrutiny. For certain, getting assault and sniper rifles was not a problem. The Gaza Strip and West Bank were awash in weapons. Over time, the Palestinian resistance developed a clandestine system of training to include sniper instruction. It was relatively easy for unarmed sniper students to cross the border into neighboring Jordan or Egypt, receive sniper training in complete freedom in the safety of the shadow of their Arab big brothers, and then return to the occupied territories, pick up a rifle, and begin their sniping. Also, Palestinian snipers could train in the comfort of their hometowns by attending underground guerrilla training camps run out of a series of safe houses. Since the guerrillas had thousands of homes, businesses, and other structures to operate from, the Israelis could not account for even a fraction of them. Therefore, sniper training took place inside the occupied territories under the noses of their enemies. Perhaps the biggest strength of the Palestinian sniper effort was its redundancy, as exhibited by the confusing array of Palestinian resistance groups opposing Israel. Let us look at the PLO, which itself was an umbrella organization consisting of Fatah, which had subgroups like 417, Tanzim, and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, DFLP, the Palestinian People's Party, PPP, the Palestine Liberation Front, PLF, Abu Abbas faction, the Arab Liberation Front, ALF, As-Sa'ika, the Palestine Democratic Union, FIDA, the Palestinian Popular Struggle Front, PPSF, Samir Gaza faction, the Palestinian Arab Front, PAF, and former members like the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, General Command, PFLPEGC, and Fatah Uprising Abu Musa faction. While these groups fell under the PLO umbrella, they may or may not support specific PLO policies. The end result was the Palestinian resistance became a redundant, covert movement, able to conduct sustained guerrilla warfare over space and time in the face of fierce opposition by the best military in the Middle East, in spite of Israelis' uncontested superiority in infantry, tanks, artillery, planes, helicopters, and ships. Palestinian snipers continued to plague the Israel Goliath for decades. The Palestinian sniper effort focused on two main goals: the gradual attrition of Israel's military and the infliction of terror on Israeli society. Either one is acceptable. Shooting an Israeli soldier in the head helps weaken the Zionist military, and shooting down an Israeli woman with a well-aimed bullet strikes terror in the heart of the enemy. In both cases, Palestinian snipers have intentionally fired from urban areas populated by Palestinian civilians to provoke an Israeli reaction, resulting in the death of innocent people and the destruction of private property. Taking this into account, Palestinian sniper operations were intended to polarize Palestinian society and alienate the population against Israel by sacrificing their own people. The Palestinian sniper campaign on the streets. A central element of the Palestinian sniper campaign was the attrition of Israel's military. Constant pressure against the Israeli military, though effective sniping, was meant to put the Israelis on the defensive, to raise their body count to an unacceptably high level, to wear them down mentally, and provoke them into an overreaction against the Palestinian people. A favorite target for Palestinian snipers was the Israeli outpost. Since these outposts were static and therefore could be studied, and often located in predominantly Arab areas, they were a convenient and ever-present source of victims. For example, on April 1, 2001, a hidden sniper took aim at Reserve Israeli Sergeant Yaakov Krenchel as he was on guard duty at an outpost near the West Bank village of Salim. The sniper was accurate, firing a single bullet that struck the young 23-year-old soldier in the head. Fatefully, before the shooting, soldiers at the outpost complained to their chain of command that the outpost was exposed, and adding a camouflage net could help screen the soldiers from enemy snipers. However, the Israeli military had an enormous task in trying to make every single one of its hundreds of outposts sniper-proof. The reality was, if the Palestinian snipers analyzed a large enough sampling of outposts, they were bound to find one more exposed than the others. Any Israeli soldier on guard duty also makes an inviting target because they can be stalked by a methodical sniper. On April 2, 2001, Israeli Sergeant Danny Darai, a 20-year-old Israeli soldier, was shot and killed by a Palestinian sniper while on guard duty at Rachel's tomb at the entrance of Bethlehem. In response to the attack, Israeli tanks opened fire on the hotel from which the sniper fired from. The hotel was an ideal sniper platform because of the multitude of windows, doors, openings to fire from. The sturdy construction of the building protected the shooter, and any attack on the hotel by Israel would inflict further infrastructure damage in another urban area in the West Bank. This was precisely the kind of reaction the Palestinians wanted. They wanted a tank to try and kill a lone sniper with a single rifle. The Palestinian resistance, like the IRA, was also skilled in using come-alongs to draw Israel forces out of their protected combat outposts and into a less secure ambush site. For instance, in February 2003, an Israeli armored patrol investigated a car suspected of being rigged with explosives, which was parked near the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. The Israeli forces responded appropriately, securing the surrounding area until explosive ordnance personnel could be brought in to detonate the car in a controlled manner. However, an Israeli company commander on the scene, Captain Shahar Shnerl, was shot and killed by a sniper who opened fire at short range from a nearby alley. Even though Captain Shmuel was wearing body armor, it did not matter since he was shot in the neck. In this case, the car bomb proved to be an effective way to draw out Israeli forces, which in turn opened them up to attack by a hidden sniper who anticipated the Israelis' moves. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine later claimed responsibility for the attack. The Ofra checkpoint shooting. The single most infamous and devastating sniper attack made against the Israelis was on a Sunday, March 3rd, 2002, near the small town of Ofra, north of the West Bank town of Ramallah. On this day, the Israeli military manned a vehicle checkpoint as the soldiers stood at their roadblock, most of whom were Army reservists. An unseen sniper opened fire, killing one of the soldiers. However, the other members of the checkpoint could not find the sniper, and as they looked desperately in all directions, they were in turn shot themselves. When the commander of the roadblock stepped out of an old British prison located near the roadblock to see what was going on, he was shot and killed. Then a medic arrived on the scene to treat his fallen comrades, and he too was shot and killed. 3 other Jewish civilians were shot and killed as they approached the roadblock in their vehicles. In total, 10 Israelis were shot and killed by the sniper, 7 soldiers and 3 civilians. Another 6 were wounded. The soldiers wore flak jackets and helmets, but the sniper managed to shoot around these protective items to get a killing shot. Then the sniper vanished. An investigation of the scene of the shooting later determined a total of 25 bullets were fired by the sniper over the span of 25 minutes from a distance of 75 yards. After the shooting, criticism of Israel and her military hit the media outlets like an avalanche. Senior members of the Israeli Defense Forces commented publicly it was disgraceful that a lone shooter could kill so many people and get away with it. Ariel Sharon and his government faced severe criticism for blundering time and again, and the latest sniper attack was just one more example of his administration's military ineptitude. Military observers wondered if the PLO had finally developed a competent sniper corps and how long it would be until Israel admitted failure in its long-running counter-guerrilla campaign against the PLO and Hamas. In the hypersensitive situation inside Israel, the attack was interpreted as foreshadowing a half-dozen different doomsday trends. In a knee-jerk reaction to the wave of criticism from all corners, the Israeli military immediately dismantled its most exposed roadblocks and beefed up security at others. Perhaps the Palestinians were waging a new war against the checkpoints and intended to bleed the Israelis by picking off a roadblock at a time while providing freedom of movement for their own guerrilla units. What happened? How did an alert roadblock come under fire in the morning hours and get decimated by a lone gunman? To many, the horrific results were not surprising. In fact, the soldiers who manned the checkpoint previously told their leaders the roadblock was in poor position and essentially indefensible, as it was located in a valley below adjacent wooded hills. However, the chain of command failed to provide any additional security measures, such as placing an observation post in the hills above the checkpoint in order to forestall just such an attack. Investigators later disclosed they found a single, antiquated World War II-era bolt-action carbine on a hill near the checkpoint. The barrel had ruptured and was left behind after the sniper fled the scene. Was that the answer? Did a lone gunman climb on top of a nearby hill with an outdated rifle and pick off 10 victims, only stopping after the gun blew up in their hands? Investigators calculated the walls of the valley caused the sounds of the gunshots to echo, making it impossible for the people at the bloody roadblock to determine from what direction the shots came. As soon as the gunfire died down, a gaggle of military analysts and experts created possible explanations as to what happened at the checkpoint. Some saw the hand of the IRA behind the shootings. After all, the IRA collaborated with the FARC in Colombia and with Hezbollah in Lebanon, so it made sense they could have trained the PLO. Also, reported tactic among IRA snipers was to leave a gun at the scene of a shooting so British investigators would focus on the wrong weapon and spend their limited forensic assets on a red herring. Other experts with purported access to official investigative findings said the lone gunman theory was all wrong and there was a shooter on one of the hilltops, but there was also another team set up in another location armed with a machine gun. In this scenario, the sniper was used to distract and expose the soldiers at the checkpoint, while the machine gun team did the real work, mowing down the Israeli soldiers and civilians. Other experts said there were several sniper teams using modern semi-automatic sniper rifles. Still others surmised no Palestinian sniper was so skilled as to conduct such an effective attack. Foreign snipers from Chechnya or Bosnia or even Arab veterans from Al-Qaeda must have done the shooting. Some media articles were even floated stating the CIA trained a certain number of Palestinian Authority policemen in sniper tactics, and one of these policemen had gone rogue and killed those at Ofra. The rumors were endless. In October 2004, some light was finally shed on the Ofra checkpoint shootings when the Israelis captured 28-year-old Ka'ad Hamad, a member of Yasser Arafat's Fatah movement. Hamad was arrested in his hometown near Ramallah, not far from Ofra. Under questioning, Hamad confessed to being the shooter who killed the 10 people at the Ofra checkpoint more than 2 years earlier. Hamad stated he trained with an old Mauser 7.92mm rifle in the wadis around his home until he became a proficient shooter. Hamad also described in full detail the events of the shooting, matching exactly the events pieced together by eyewitnesses and forensic evidence at the crime scene. According to Hamad's testimony, the shooting took place exactly how the experts said it did. Not. Hamad was not a foreign mercenary or a trained sniper who was blooded in the wars of the Balkans or Caucasus. He was a local man who trained himself to shoot in true guerrilla fashion. He opened fire on the checkpoint at Ofra using a World War II-era Mauser K98. Hamad shot 6 Israeli soldiers with his bolt-action rifle, reloaded, and continued to shoot more. He kept shooting, and would have shot many more until the old Mauser blew up in his hands as he was firing it. After that, he left the rifle where it was and fled back to the nearby territory controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Even though the Israeli military and government did not want to admit a lone, untrained man could shoot 16 people with impunity and then simply walk away, that is exactly what happened. Suppressed sniping in Gaza. While the Israeli military was generally unimpressed with the professional ability of most Palestinian snipers, the Ofra checkpoint shooting caused such a stir because it shattered the established pattern. Some snipers did not fit this established profile. Howard Lynette, an independent journalist, experienced firsthand one of the better trained Palestinian snipers in February 2007 as he reported on Israeli military operations in the Gaza Strip. Lynette and his escort had just pulled over to offer a group of Israeli soldiers a ride when a small explosion of concrete erupted against the nearby wall, showering Lynette and the adjacent soldiers with shards of concrete and bullet fragments. Everyone was stunned for a second. Their minds moved in slow motion as they tried to comprehend what just happened. After all, there was no gunshot, just the sound of metal objects slamming into the concrete wall. Lynette eventually yelled, "Get down, take cover, sniper." As the exposed soldiers frantically took cover inside the building, Lynette and his driver took off out of the kill zone. A subsequent inspection of their Jeep showed the bullet ricocheted off the wall and struck the vehicle's rear bumper. Everyone momentarily froze because the sniper used a suppressed weapon. Lynette was not sure if the sound they heard was the supersonic crack of the bullet or the sound of the round hitting the concrete wall. Either way, they never heard a gunshot. Lynette assumed the sniper did not have a good shot on them, so he intentionally targeted the building, hoping the soldiers' curiosity would draw someone out into the open where the second shot would be dead on. Lynette tried to reverse engineer the shooting and guessed if the noise he heard was the sound of the bullet striking concrete, then the sniper must have used a suppressed weapon as well as subsonic ammunition. Any weapon could have made the shot, like an SVD with hand-loaded subsonic ammunition. A subsonic shot would have to be made relatively close, 400 meters or less, since we know some subsonic ammunition with particularly heavy bullets like the Russian Vintorez VSS suppressed sniper rifle is lethal at that range. If the sound Lynette heard was really the supersonic crack of the bullet, then the shooter could be as far out as 1,000 meters. Regardless of the actual sniper equipment used, suppressor and/or subsonic ammunition, clearly some Palestinian snipers learned to exploit the capability of suppressed weapons in an urban environment. In this case, the sniper was able to make a shot in broad daylight in the presence of alert, armed soldiers and remain undetected. Since the Israeli soldiers had no idea where the sniper shot came from, they could not respond to the threat. All they could do was hide while the shooter made a stealthy getaway. If all Palestinian snipers understood the advantage silent sniping gave them, the Gaza Strip and West Bank would be a much more dangerous place for Israeli soldiers and settlers. In spite of being successful experiences with suppressed sniping, most Palestinian snipers have not learned this lesson and still conduct unsuppressed sniping operations where the shooter suffers from large muzzle flash and gunshot. Mercenary snipers. Whenever an unusually skilled sniper is involved in a shooting, like at the Ofra checkpoint shootings and the above suppressed sniper attack, the Israelis immediately suspect a foreign sniper was involved. This suspicion is due mainly to the long track record of the Palestinians' relatively poor sniping ability. As a result, when a sniper somewhere in the West Bank or elsewhere began picking off Israeli soldiers with difficult shots, eyebrows were raised. While Lynette was on his tour in Gaza, the Israeli officer escorting him told him there was at least one skilled sniper team working the Gaza Strip. This team, apparently, went to great lengths to plan their operations and only fired from ideal shooting platforms where it was difficult for the Israelis to determine where they fired from. Also, after the shootings, Israeli soldiers never found any incriminating physical evidence like expended brass. This sniper team had recently picked off several Israeli soldiers in the area. One victim was a high-ranking Israeli officer who was riding in a vehicle when he was killed with a single shot. Another soldier was on guard duty when they heard a burst of gunfire. The soldier opened the vision slot of their guard post to see where the shot came from. As soon as the observation slot opened, a bullet flew in, killing the soldier. Obviously, the snipers who shot a moving target and fired through a narrow vision port were not just tactically savvy, they were technically proficient shooters. The word on the street was this particular sniper team learned Russian tactics and fieldcraft at one of the private free enterprise schools run by retired Spetsnaz snipers in a former Soviet republic. This same team was also suspected of receiving sniper training in the United States by CIA subcontractors, another recycling of the CIA-trained PLO sniper squad story. Rumors even circulated the team had practical experience in Chechnya fighting the Russians. As with skilled snipers all over the world, the rumor mill went into overdrive as the shooter's reputation grew. If one were to believe all these rumors, this team was the hardest working snipers around, traveling the globe in search of better sniping schools and fighting all over the world, all without getting arrested, detained, questioned, or shot. Now they were back in Palestine, putting their years of experience and training to use to kill Israelis in the Gaza Strip. Others, besides Lynette and the Israeli unit he worked with, noted the same phenomena. Years earlier, in 2004, a soldier manning an Israeli Defense Force, IDF, rooftop guard post noticed a pair of men walking in the Gaza Strip about 500 meters away. The two men were talking to each other and then disappeared from view behind some houses. An hour and a half later, this same Israeli soldier got up from where he was sitting in order to move to a different part of the roof. While he stood up, the soldier exposed himself for a few brief seconds, hardly any time at all, really. Suddenly, he was knocked off his feet as an incoming bullet nailed him in the shoulder. Another soldier on the rooftop returned fire, but did not hit the sniper. After the bullet was surgically removed from his shoulder, forensic analysis showed the bullet was a 5.56mm round fired from an M16. Further investigation revealed the round was fired from 500 meters away, in the same area the soldier saw the two men walking and talking. Apparently, these two men created the appearance of normal behavior while they scouted for Israeli victims. Since the men did not have any visible weapons and were not doing anything threatening, the Israeli soldiers could only report what they saw. In the ensuing 90 minutes between the scouting mission and the actual shooting, the sniper team observed the terrain and made a hasty plan. Ultimately, the sniper was able to move into position undetected, rapidly fire off a single shot into a slightly exposed moving target, and then safely leave the area without being caught. Overall, this was a pretty impressive piece of urban guerrilla sniping. After the shooting on the roof, the Israeli soldier who returned fire at the sniper and caught a brief glimpse of him swore the man looked European. This was not an isolated incident, as several other Israeli units who worked the Gaza area said they too encountered extremely proficient snipers who they suspected of being foreigners. All these encounters were similar. A sniper took a quick shot at an exposed target and then immediately disappeared. The sniper never stuck around to be caught or to make another shot. These foreign snipers were suspected of staying in the Gaza Strip for only brief periods of time, maybe a couple days, and then they took their money and ran. This brief time period, combined with rotating the snipers, meant the shooters for hire did not set a distinct, identifiable pattern and were therefore very difficult, if not impossible, to track or anticipate. And since the snipers were not in country for long, local Israeli intelligence assets failed to get any concrete information on them. Critical profiling methods or other pattern analysis tools were thus rendered ineffective.